Hello and welcome to a special episode of Phoenix Cinema Podcast, and the reason this is a special episode is because we have a special guest. And that guest is the BAFTA-nominated film and TV composer of such TV hits as Nolly, The Guest, and the Doctor Who spin-off Class, as well as the podcast series Torchwood and the feature film documentaries Becoming Hitchcock, The Legacy of Blackmail, and the recent The Age of Disclosure. Everybody, please welcome to the podcast Blair, and I didn't ask you how to pronounce your last name beforehand, I'm sorry, so I'll let you take that away.
Mowat.
Mowat,
yes.
Blair Mowat. Okay, pleasure. Blair, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your time today.
No worries at all. Glad to be here.
I'd love to know about how this all began for you. Were you born and raised in Scotland?
I was born and raised in Scotland. I was born and raised in Edinburgh. First 18 years of my life, I lived there.
I went to Edinburgh for the first time with my girlfriend, a few months ago for a wedding. And I was
wow, okay.
I want to move here. I want to move here.
I think a lot of people would quite like to move to Edinburgh, which keeps the house prices nice and high.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I recommend it. It's a beautiful place. Yeah, lovely.
It's very Harry Potter. I feel very Harry Potter-ish. Did they film anything there?
I'm not sure they filmed stuff there. They may have done, but J.K. Rowling wrote most of Harry Potter in Edinburgh. She got some of the character names from this graveyard that's near Greyfriars Bobby, and you go in and you can actually see some of the I think like the Riddle grave is there maybe and stuff like that. And there's a bunch of other characters, and there was a cafe. The Elephant House, I think it was called. I think it might have burned down. Oh gosh, can't remember. But she used to write there, and she became too popular, and she couldn't write there anymore. She finished the Harry Potter series in, I think it was the Balmoral Hotel, and there is a plaque in one of the rooms where she actually finished the final book. In Edinburgh, yeah, and her children actually went to, or at least one of her children went to the school that I actually went to, which is called George Heriot's, and it does have turrets, and it does look a little bit like Hogwarts. So I think it was part of the inspiration, along with a whole other bunch of buildings and schools in Edinburgh, because these amazing old schools. That do look a little bit like Hogwarts, not quite as big and grand as Hogwarts, but still kind of nuts when you look back on that's where you were at school, and you were actually going up turrets with stone stairs. So wow. It's the closest thing, I guess, to being at Hogwarts without the spells. No dark arts class for me.
So right on the money. That is fascinating. I wish I spoke to you before I went. Yeah, we could have visited this graveyard.
You could go again. It's only 4.5 hours on the train.
Yeah, good excuse to be fair.
Absolutely. It's definitely worth going back. I don't know how I know so much about Harry Potter. That was quite a little it's like I'm an Edinburgh tour guide or something.
Right, yeah. Brilliant. Perfect. So were you born into a musical or creative family?
Not a kind of. My dad would play musical instruments growing up a bit, and he kind of fell out of it, and then came back to it when I started to learn guitar. Before that I'd learned piano and the harp, the clarsach, which is the Celtic harp. My mum took piano lessons when she was younger, but I've never even seen her attempt to play the piano since, so she sort of walked away from that. I do have I think it's a great aunt called Sansha Paloo, who was a famous harpist who taught a lot of the harp teachers that taught me, and that's one of the reasons I played harp as my first instrument. But it was kind of a bit of a surprise that I ended up actually going into music, because I guess it was clear to me when I was about 14 or 15, 16, I started to play in a band. And then I started to write songs, and then I started writing chamber pieces in the the classroom in the music studies that I was doing at school. And then I sort of went off because I was a fan of filmmaking as well, and I would make films with my friends on mini DV cameras of like horror films and stuff, with like blood capsules, like spitting them out. And I love filmmaking. I loved writing music, so why not write music for films? And it was just like, it's almost like there was a calling inside me that was like, this is what you have to do. And I just had like laser focus to do film and TV scoring since like the age of like 16, 17. It was weird.
Yeah, you have in your, at least in your filmography, you can see you've started off with a lot of short films, as is usually the way, right? When people want to get into this business. When you were, who did you find? Who was your group of people? Did you have similar, like-minded, creative friends that you made these projects with?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny story actually, because when I was at Durham University, I studied music there, and I went along to the film club to see what they were making, and this is now sort of showing my age, but we hadn't quite reached the era of like DSLR cameras that could film video and stuff like that. So they were filming on those kind of like horrible kind of mini DV cameras that made everything look like a documentary, and I was just like, this is rubbish. I don't want to be involved. Like it's no like shade on the talent of like the filmmakers, and obviously like someone like Danny Boyle made 28 Days Later,
right?
On, you know, a not very good camera. It is perfectly possible to sort of do that, but with the resources that they had available, which are obviously very different from what Danny had, I actually
couldn't shut down London.
I couldn't shut down London, unfortunately, no. So I turned my attention towards the theatre because there was this amazing crowd of people that were doing all these amazing theatre projects like Angels in America and like Under Milk Wood. There was a production of Dracula that I did, which I had live orchestra in the orchestra pit. I had a live choir. I was conducting it as it was going along. And it was just amazing. And I could write all these scores for all these cool projects and just learn like writing music for drama that way. And it was, to me, it was so much more satisfying than doing these film projects that the technology just wasn't quite there. And I was only about 4 years away, like 3 or 4 years away. So by the time I got to Bristol afterwards, where I did my master's, that's when things like the Red camera had started to come out, and you could film progressively, not to get like too nerdy, but like, you know, you could do 1080p, looks like film, shallow depth of field, using the right lenses and stuff, so that it felt more like it was an actual film, more cinematic. And that's when I started to really get into doing those short films. So there were filmmakers at Bristol, both. There was an amazing society that just students of all studies were making films. There's a great guy there called Adam Butcher. Shout out to Adam Butcher. He's still a friend of mine. We did some films together. And then there was also a course for filmmakers where people would come from all over the world to study at Bristol. So I did some films with them. And then to finish off answering your question, when I moved to London, which I think was 2008, I just started going to film festivals, meeting friends of friends who were filmmakers. And I just started getting recommendations for stuff. And my philosophy was, because I was 21 at the time, so like I was a baby, and so nobody would hire me because it's just too young to, you know, give somebody like £100,000 to go record an orchestra. It's too much of a risk for all these execs. So I was kind of treading water, waiting for to kind of amass the amount of experience, or sort of like make my skin look old enough that somebody would give me a job. And so I just did all these short films, and I did about 80, I think, so 80 to 100 short films. Not all of them are on IMDb. There are ones that I did that they never even got released, which is remarkable. Like we went to all the effort and then never got released. But yeah, a lot of short films, and I just saw it as homework. Like you're basically just practicing your craft. I'm sure you've heard that thing about doing like 10,000 hours of, you know, what you do to become an expert in it. And so I guess that was it for me. I'd done my studies, but there's no better way to learn than by doing. And so by just scoring like a bucket load of films, by the time I started to get my like indie features and my first like TV projects, I'd done it so many times. I was ready. I was ready to do it.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah, because that's a big number. You know,
Yeah, yeah,
I remember Denzel Washington at one awards ceremony. He was about to present Barry Jenkins with an award. You know, the director of what was the film Moonlight, and
yes,
and I remember, you know, he decided to give a little speech about Barry Jenkins' career, and basically was saying, I'm paraphrasing, but he said something like, "This guy did not come out of nowhere. This guy directed 7 short films before he got to his first feature. 7." And I was like,
yeah,
7? That's a lot. 80?
yeah. I mean, listen,
Wow.
it's a lot. It's a lot harder to, direct 80 short films than it is to score them.
Right.
Especially when they're short, you can really sort of bash through them.
Mm.
Still taking great care, but it's just a lot quicker for me to do it. Than he's
Right.
setting everything up, finding the crew in the edit, doing a festival run that's like taking up his time, so he can't get
That's true.
back to do another one. So. But yeah, I think 7 for a director is really impressive.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Then. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah,
That's
if he'd
really
done 80,
interesting.
I would actually think he was almost crazy. Which maybe that means I'm crazy, but like I said, it's different being a composer.
Yeah, absolutely. So what were your, then growing up then, did you have any specific film and musical inspirations growing up? Were there any films or film scores that grabbed your attention and sort of lit a spark?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I did when I heard Star Wars as a kid. Obviously, I know it's a cliche to say that, but when I heard Star Wars as a kid, I was like, wow, that music really does just grab you. And I've always loved orchestral music as well, but obviously, Star Wars is very reminiscent of the romantic period of music history. So people like Tchaikovsky and arguably Rachmaninoff and stuff as well. There's that stuff is so like cinematic and works well with film scoring. But when it came to like other film composers, like Danny Elfman, when all the Edward Scissorhands scores, the Batman Returns. I love Batman Returns. Those early Danny Elfman scores in particular, they're so musically rich and atmospheric that they were definitely an influence as well. And then, yeah, bunch of, so many composers: Carter Burwell, Bernard Herrmann, Michael Giacchino was beginning to become a bit of a name at that point. He'd just done Alias and then Lost. And that for me, like, it showed me that TV scores didn't need to sound like these sort of hokey MIDI sampled, like, not so great scores in the background. J.J. Abrams had given him the budget to actually do effectively a film score for a TV show, but they were making it on a network as well. So we're doing it like almost weekly, getting those scores out. But it sounded amazing. And that then led to things like Battlestar Galactica and things like that having live music as well. And it changed. It basically changed and moved us into the golden age of television, including television music.
You're the first composer I've spoken to who, when talking about these inspirations, has mentioned Giacchino and Lost.
Yeah.
And I really like you for that, because Lost is probably my favorite. If you ask me what my favorite score is of all time, it's Lost. Look, I have the, I don't know if you know the show, but I have a Lost tattoo. I went to go
amazing. I do. Yeah, I've watched it all.
Oh, really?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, I went to, was it last year? I went to Hawaii to watch Lost in concert, to watch Giacchino conduct the whole thing. I'm that into it. And I totally agree, dude. There's never been anything like it before or since, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So that must have been on Oahu, was it? Or maybe it was on the Big Island in Hawaii.
Yes.
Because Oahu is where they filmed Lost. And I've been to Oahu. And when I was there, when we were like driving around, I would like put the Lost soundtrack on. And we'd go from this like amazing kind of like jungle forest to like a tunnel that had like strip lighting up top, and it felt like you're in an episode of Lost because you were going into like almost like going into the hatch or some weird like Dharma thing, and then you come back out the other side and then you'd be like, Jurassic Park, effectively, because they also filmed Jurassic Park there, as I'm sure
Yes,
you know as
yes,
well.
they did.
And
That's
it does
amazing.
feel like you're in Jurassic Park. You're like, wow, this is driving around in a Jeep in Jurassic Park. So yeah, I absolutely love Lost, and I think that emotional like sensibility as well, like with the music, oh, just fantastic. And there is in my DNA, because I was listening to it around the time that I was kind of formulating my musical voice. You can hear it. You know, there's moments where there's definitely like you're like 20% Giacchino, along with all the other like
right.
composers as well.
Yes.
But yeah, I could send you some tracks after this. We'd be like, oh wow, okay,
Please.
it's a little bit more than 20%. Just in the same ways that like John Williams was a huge influence for him, and also Bernard Herrmann. You can really hear Bernard Herrmann's music, I think, in Giacchino, particularly in Lost. There's all these like close up harmonies in the string playing and stuff, and it's very reminiscent sometimes of Bernard Herrmann.
I love that. You can hear the influences just weave in and out of these different artists and composers. Sometimes you go, oh, that's Morricone, or that's, you can, it just reminds you, it's very similar to their sensibilities. Yeah. So
totally. But yeah, Lost is absolutely fantastic. In terms of the music, particularly like, I mean, the whole thing is, but like those albums, season 1 and season 2 albums, like, yeah, absolutely. Especially when you get to the finale stuff, like at the end of the seasons, some absolute crackers.
Dude, listen, have you heard the Lost live concert album? It's on Spotify.
I think I have actually. Yeah. I noticed. Is that the one that they did did they do it in Ireland?
Yes.
I think maybe.
Yes,
yeah. I have heard some of that. Yeah. I actually saw Carlton. I saw Carlton Cuse walking around my neighborhood. He must live, or I don't know exactly where he lives. But there was this man that like walked past, and I was like, that man looks a bit like Carlton Cuse, but so do a lot of people probably. Like,
Sure.
like he is, you could mistake him for somebody else, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And then I was walking like my dogs, I think, and I went round the corner or whatever, and then he went round the corner, and then I saw him again, and I was like, it's definitely Carlton Cuse.
Did you speak to him?
He was on a phone call, and so because he was on a phone call, I was like, that'd be a dick move to like interrupt him. Even though he's like a writing hero of mine because of what he did with Damon Lindelof for that show. I did really want to speak to him though, because I mean, what an absolute legend. And I love like, not to get too deep into it, but I love the lore around the making of Lost and how Damon Lindelof like was told it wasn't going to be a success, and then it was a success, and he would be having brunch in LA, hearing people talk about the polar bears, and he was like, well, where did the polar bears come from? And he's like, I don't fucking know where the polar bears come from. Shit, I've only written like 4 episodes of this stuff. Like, and now the network, 5 seasons? So he has to call up Carlton Cuse, who was his mentor, I believe, to say like, Carlton, we got to write like 5 TV seasons worth of stuff. You got to come and help me. And then they are sort of like kind of making it up as they go along. Which is, I mean, what a position to be in. And he was like 30 years old.
He was so young.
So it's quite young.
Yeah.
It's quite young. So that's a really stressful position to be in, where you've just got like one of the biggest TV shows in the world going, and you were told it was going to be a failure by the network, and then all these people watch it and they're just like, oh, it's amazing.
Yeah, at a time when TV shows really started and showrunners really started to have this online presence, and then you have the internet is all of a sudden, you have chat boards, and so the focus is so intense, way more than it ever has been previously.
Yeah.
It's a lot of pressure, yeah. I met Carlton Cuse at that thing.
You did?
The concert, cool. Yeah. So the day before, him and Giacchino were doing a signing, and we'll get to you, Blair. I promise. Now that
I think we should just make a podcast about Lost. To be honest, maybe it should be a weekly thing.
Maybe it should. Listen, I'm down. Yeah, and then you could sign up and then go and Giacchino was releasing this album like all his hits, but in like an island sort of format. He's released a couple of them, and you could go and I've
got them. I've got it.
Really?
It's my friend worked on it. They're like this sort of calypso, like Hawaiian versions of the stuff. Yeah, I actually play it for. It's a really good dinner party LP. So I put the vinyl on when I have like guests around, and then they'll be like, "Is that the Incredibles?" Or like, "Is that up?" Like, why is it like a weird like Hawaiian calypso version? So sorry to interrupt you, but I'm just like
I love
there are
that.
only
No.
there are only certain people in the world who own that vinyl.
Right, exactly. Yes. Oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, and you could sign up and go into this record store and he'll sign it for you and sign a lost concert poster. Anyway, funny quick story. My brother was there with his girlfriend. He took a different flight to Hawaii than I did. I was late getting there. So I didn't think I was going to make it. By the time I landed, they were wrapping up. So I was texting him and I was like, I didn't get to meet Giacchino and Q's, but it's all good. It's all good. I hope you had a good time. He was like, you could probably still make it if you, I was like, I'm still on the runway. He was like, listen, you don't go through customs in Hawaii. You've already been through like Seattle. You can just go out into a cab right around the corner.
Yeah.
So long story short, I made it. They spoke to the organizers. They were like, listen, my brother's coming. He's paid. They were like, where is he? They'd been there for like 3 hours with these crazy lost fans. I think they'd had enough by that point.
Yeah, I'm sure they had.
I got there, jumped out of the cab. I ran over to the door and my brother's like, oh, he's here. They're like, he's here. They were like, okay, last one. He's the last one. I got in. And I remember I grabbed my poster and my vinyl and I walked over and Giacchino's there and Carlton Cuse is there. And I went and I spoke to Giacchino. And in all fairness, I think he was checked out. Giacchino was done. I wanted to talk about his concerts and Lost and everything like that. And he was just like, it wasn't really, but Cuse was locked in. He shook my hand.
Was he?
He asked me my name. He thanked me so much for making the trip. I was like, whoa. It was such an amazing thing. He really it was like so personable. So I'll never forget that.
You're making me regret not interrupting his phone.
It's cool, yeah.
Because he probably would have been like, "Fuck
just
this guy I'm speaking to on the phone. I got a Lost fan in front of me. Let's talk about Dharma. Let's talk about the polar bears."
Yeah. I'd like to think so.
Well, I've always hoped that I'd see him again, like walking around, because I would want to say hi to him, as long as it felt like appropriate and I wasn't, sort of.
So you live in LA?
Kind of annoying him. So I live between LA and London, depending on the year. Sounds like quite a wanky thing to say, doesn't it? Oh yeah, I live between LA and London, but it's true. Like I spend a certain amount of time in Los Angeles and a certain amount of time in London, depending on what I'm working on. And I'm married to an American, and there's certain visa things where you have to spend a certain amount of time here and
I see.
there, and that changes over time as well as with the rules and stuff. So currently, I am spending a lot of time in Los Angeles, but and I do love it, but I would like to spend more of next year back in the UK a little bit, if I could, because huge amount of friends and family there. And I did mean to tell you, actually, I used to live for 9 years in Hampstead Garden suburb, and so I was not far away from the Phoenix Cinema, right?
Oh, really?
Because you're in East Finchley, right?
I'm not personally. The cinema is, I don't know that area too well at all, to be very honest with you. So is it close? I don't know.
It is. I mean, it's on the other side of Hampstead Garden suburb. Yeah.
Did you ever visit it?
I used to cycle past it, but shamefully, I don't think I'd ever gone in. But I always used to think of Mark Kermode when I went past, because I think Mark Kermode is a huge fan of the Phoenix Cinema, and he would always kind of bring it up and he'd be like, "Oh, it's one of the best cinemas in town." So I don't think I ever went. I feel really bad now. I'm gonna have to go.
There's still time. Please do come down. Time. We'd love to have you. Definitely.
Yeah. We should do a screening of the Age of Disclosure, and then we can have a Q&A afterwards.
Listen, it's happened before. I will reach out to Zaylin. I'll reach out to the manager and see what's possible. I'll ask the question.
Yeah,
definitely.
Talk about that later.
So okay. So excellent. So we'll put Lost to the side for now. We'll pick this up. We'll pick this up another time. But so you scored a lot of short films before you made it to your first feature, which clearly, as you said, it felt like a very natural progression for you. You made your way to your first feature film. How did that sort of come about? Was it through the people you were working with on the short films?
No, actually, the first ever feature. I mean, the first two features were kind of intertwined. There was one called Electric Man, which I think that was that 2010 or something. That was from my mum would send me things that she read in the newspaper. Like she'd be like, "Oh, they're making a Spider-Man 3. You should score that." And I'm like, "I don't think I'm quite there yet, mum." And then she sent me an article which would be like, "Oh, they're making like a £50,000 feature film in Edinburgh called Electric Man, which is about people who own a comic book store, and they just started filming it." And I was like, that sounds about right for where I am in my career, having never done a feature film before, and just kind of graduated university. So I actually reached out to them and said, "I'm aware you don't have a lot of money, but you know, I'm sort of looking for stuff to put on my reel, so I'm sure we can, you know, come to an agreement which be very favourable for you." I sent them some stuff that I'd done for some short films, and yeah, they loved it, and they asked me to score the film. So that was my, alongside another one called Seven Welcome to London, which was my other first feature. That was a British Bollywood thriller. So it was half in Hindi, half in English.
Wow.
And it ended in a game of Russian roulette with these like gangsters forcing like these immigrants to play a game of Russian roulette. It was bonkers. That was a guy called Asad Shan who made that. And I met him. I don't know, do they still do this? There was like I think it was called like meetup.com. Like, and it was like, you could like have these meetup groups. It was, you know, this is like 2010. And there was a film meetup group in London where you just go along and you would network and you would meet new friends, and you'd all move to the city recently or whatever. And I met this guy called Asad, and he was so entrepreneurial, and I almost didn't quite believe it because he was very like charming, but it felt like kind of too good to be true that he was making this film. And he was shooting it on the Red camera, and I knew what a Red camera was, and it had just come out, and we knew that Fincher had shot The Social Network on a Red camera, and obviously that was, you know, amazing. And I was like, oh my God, they're making a film, they're shooting it on the Red camera, like, oh, maybe I'm going to do the score. And then he calls me up like 4 or 5 months later, and he's like, right, we're shooting the film in like 2 weeks. You're doing the music, aren't you? And I'm like, okay, cool. All right, let's go. So it just shows you that like you go along to those things, and you might meet some people that, you know, you just don't gel, or, you know, they're not really, you know, serious about actually having a career or whatever. But this guy, he made a film, and you know, it was a very entertaining film. He only had a certain amount, you know, of resources, but it was more than what Electric Man had. So they did have a bigger budget than that. And the two happened, sort of intertwined. And I kind of include those two in my short film era, because I was playing around with similar resources that I had to the short films. So I didn't have like an orchestrator, a mixer, a budget to record live musicians. So they were sort of all of a piece, that it was me at the computer with a microphone trying to make stuff work by myself, in this like tiny bedroom in North London, in Angel, where I first lived, and just trying to make it work. So it really, like, when I actually got proper budget, it was probably Class, that the Doctor Who spin-off. That was the big breakthrough, I would say, when I was then recording at Air Studios, which is a fantastic place where you could, you know, record orchestras and bands and stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of film scores done then. I did do BBC Horizon, which you know, great science documentary, but even though it was paid, that is not a lot of resources again to do. So it was like maybe a bit. I was getting paid more, but I wasn't really able to like use, like, you know, a lot of live players and stuff in the creation of it. But that was me starting to build up credits, so that, you know, I got a bit of name recognition and had things on my CV that assured people that, you know, I was going to deliver the goods.
Right, and considering the amount of films that you had already worked on, what an aid for you, right? So if anyone ever came to you and said, well, then show me what you've got. Well, you had a lot to choose from. I imagine it's really important, right, to have that ready.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that was great. I remember doing the interview for Class, going through to BBC Roath in Wales, and I was able to send them like a huge amount of stuff for them to listen to. But it was still, there still had to be a bit of a leap in their imagination, because I mean, certainly I could hear the difference from like before and after, like being given significant enough budget to have like a team of collaborators who are
Mm,
experts in their own field, sort of helping you, make the score sound as good as it possibly can, and working with like world class musicians,
mm.
recording in one of the best studios in the world. Like that stuff, obviously, there's a reason it costs money, and I can hear it at the end of it, and I'm sure other
Right,
people
right,
can as well. But I
right.
wasn't able to give them like a Hollywood level production value for them to be absolutely 100%
Yes,
assured
right,
that
right.
like this is going to be okay. But there absolutely was enough for them to take that leap, and they also could tell that I was a genuine Doctor Who fan as
Mm.
well. And Derek Ritchie, the producer of Class, was like he's like a proper Doctor Who fan. He's also Scottish as well, so maybe he felt like I was a kindred spirit when I walked in,
Yeah.
and we were able to talk about like old Doctor Who episodes from the 80s at like a level of detail that probably like 0.2% of the population is
You
probably able
can't
to
fake
do.
that.
Like,
Yeah.
no, exactly. You can't fake it. When you know that the composer of the Curse of Fenric, a Sylvester McCoy episode from the late 80s, was Mark Ayres. That is a piece of niche. That is a piece of niche knowledge, considering there were so many different composers that worked on Doctor Who
Sure.
back in the day. That like if you know that and you could like answer a question like that, it's like, all right, he's one of us.
Mm, mm. So you would say your big break was Class then. Did you,
Yeah, I would. Yeah. Mm.
with something like such an expanded budget and all this extra room for you
Mm.
to work within, budgetarily speaking, did you
Yeah.
reach out to anybody for advice or any sort of guidance before launching into that?
I did. I did. Well, I'd actually. I left out that I'd worked for Murray Gold, who wrote the music for Doctor Who, for like a year beforehand, or 7, 8 months, and I was doing, I sort of assisting him, doing a whole bunch of musical arranging and work for him. And so
Mm.
I got to work on Doctor Who in some capacity around that time when it was kind of Peter Capaldi's first season and like first
Wow.
episode. And so I got to go and see the BBC National Orchestra of Wales, with the score being recorded and stuff. So I went and spoke to Murray, and I had lunch with him. We had sushi in London, and we talked about me using his theme that he'd written for Peter Capaldi's Doctor in Class,
Mm.
because Peter Capaldi appeared in Class as the Doctor, and so I did a kind of rocky, kind of guitar-y version of his theme, and I kind of got Murray's blessing to go about it, and I just got a whole bunch of advice about sort of how to get things approved, and like the sort of production process, what might come up, because this was the same production company effectively. It was the
Hmm.
BBC, it was BBC Wales, but he kind of knew, he'd been through that many times. So yeah, it was really nice to sort of sit down with him, and he was very kind with his time, and yeah, that was the main person. And then I started to formulate my own sort of team of people. So there's a mixer that I work with called John Prestige, who is at Air Studios, and he had been introduced to me by a friend, and so he became somebody that was then part of my music team, and he was taking
Right.
my compositions and he was giving them the final polish.
Mm.
And so then he's somebody that we literally just finished a TV show like 3 weeks ago. We just did season 2 of After the Flood, which will be on next year. So I'm still working with John, and that was the first gig that I'd done with him,
Oh,
and that was a
amazing.
big break for him, because it was a show about teenagers. It was a young adult show, and so I wanted to lift somebody else up, because I felt like I was being lifted up. And John
Mm.
was a little bit younger than me, but not that much younger, and this was a big break for him to kind of be the main mixer and also the recording engineer as well, like recording the strings. So for him, it was a great credit. And I knew that he was hungry, he was passionate. I knew that he would stay up till like 4 a.m. with me, like getting it just right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and he absolutely did. When we released the album, the soundtrack for that show, I think we finished it at like 6:30 a.m. or 6 a.m. because we just stayed up the whole night, and at the end we were just like drinking beers and like finishing it all off, and that was the level of like attention to detail and passion that had gone into it, because he had to work the next day on a different project and I had to do something. So like that was the deadline, and there's no way we weren't going to get it perfect. And that's why John and I just had exactly the same attitude. And to be honest, at that time in our lives, we were young enough and carefree enough that we could get away with that, because there was nobody shouting at us being like, where the fuck are you? Why aren't you home yet?
Sure.
Why haven't you taken the dogs for a walk?
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, you, in the course of this career in this industry with thousands and thousands of people, sometimes you just find your people, right? You connect with people and they become your inner circle. I love that.
And then you grow with them, and that approach to work, which to be honest is like it's a little bit toxic. It's probably not the way you should work, staying up till 6 a.m. on a regular basis. It's not good for your health. I wouldn't recommend it. Sure. And together, as you sort of grow and get older, you're like, should we stop doing that? Should we maybe just find a way that like we're on top of it, so that we don't have to stay up till 6 a.m. and increase our chances of dying of cancer in 20 years. Like let's not do that. Let's not do that.
Right.
But at that time, you can get away with it when you're in your mid 20s or whatever. Yeah, sure, you get away with that. But
yeah, definitely.
You grow together and you find ways of being. You still deliver the same product, but you work smarter, rather than harder. And you just find ways for that to level out a bit, so you're delivering just as good a product, with maybe a little bit less time that allows you to get some sleep.
I love that. You have in your filmography, you have quite a few documentaries to your name at this point, and I'm always curious. Do you find any fundamental difference between scoring fictional narrative as opposed to real life stories, or does the same principle apply for you?
I actually think they're quite different, and they're quite hard documentaries, because you've got to keep your powder relatively dry, because you don't want to manipulate too much, because you're documenting something that it exists, whereas in drama. You're heightening something quite often, or you're revealing an internal dialogue within the character. You're adding a layer of textuality, which may not be present on screen, and you're enhancing a performance. And there's so much you can do with that. With documentaries, certainly on something like The Age of Disclosure, which is the most recent doc that came out, that was adding a lot of musical punctuation, I think. So like a certain section of the documentary would be talking about a particular thing. It would come to an end, the music would come to an end, and then a new piece of music will start up, and it will kind of let you know to take a breath as an audience member. And it's an incredibly dense documentary. There's a lot of information like packed in. The original cut was like 4.5 hours, so you can imagine like to get that down to like 1 hour 45 or 1 hour 50. There's a huge amount of fascinating information in the documentary, which is about the existence of intelligent non-human life. So yeah, UAPs, aliens.
I love that. I already said to you before we started the call, I'm a massive fan of the X-Files. So just the synopsis of what The Age of Disclosure is about looks really interesting to me. But before we get even into that, and thank you for answering that so honestly, because that's very, very fascinating to think about as a composer. The difference between films, narrative fiction, and documentaries. You scored Becoming Hitchcock, The Legacy of Blackmail recently, which was directed by Laurent Bozero.
Laurent Bozero is I believe that's how you say it. That's how I say it. And I believe that's how you say it.
Amazing. I mean, speaking of you growing up with one of your influences being John Williams, I mean, he's made quite a name for himself recently, directing Jaws at 50, music by John Williams, and very much seems to be Spielberg's documentarian. The amount of Spielberg behind the scenes docs he's done, it would appear that way. How did this collaboration come about?
This is quite a cool story, because I did a radio play called The Blind Man, which was a script written by Ernest Lehman in 1950 for Hitchcock that film was never made. But then Radio 4 did this series of unmade movies as like radio plays, like 90-minute radio plays. And Mark Gatiss asked me to do the music for that because I'd met him during the 50th anniversary Doctor Who celebrations at the BFI. We sat next to each other. We watched The Robots of Death, the Tom Baker story. And we ended up becoming friends because he's also a big fan of Doctor Who, and we had a lot of common interests. And they did not have a large budget because it was a Radio 4 radio play. So he asked me if I could do like a Bernard Herrmann type score for this Hitchcock film that was never made. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. So very short amount of time to do it. Very tricky. But I did this Bernard Herrmann-esque score. And the opening titles in particular, which I got to spend a bit more time on than everything else, I really do feel like it was pretty successful in feeling like it could have been like the Herrmann theme for this film that never existed. So Laurent was very involved with the Hitchcock estate and the grandchildren of Hitchcock and kind of keeping his legacy alive. So he has to kind of approve things and make sure that everything is kosher. And he heard this and he was like, oh, like this sounds like Bernard Herrmann. This is fantastic. I love this guy. Wow. So 10 years later, I get an email from Studio Canal saying, Laurent Bozarau is making a documentary about Hitchcock and he'd like to speak to you about doing the music. He had no idea that I was in Los Angeles at that moment. He's also in Los Angeles. And then he finds out that I'm in LA too. And he's like, well, let's go for pancakes and discuss. So off we go to Hugo's and we get, I get some gluten-free pancakes. And he's like, you know, I'm doing a documentary about Hitchcock and I'd love you to do the music because I heard your music 10 years ago. And if I said to myself, if I ever did this, it had to be you. And here we are now. So I said, of course I said yes. He's got a very impressive, he's got a very impressive track record, and as you said, he's worked very closely with Spielberg, and done a huge amount of his like sort of making ofs and stuff on the films. Yeah. And they did a great documentary about World War II and filmmakers going over and filming that, and Spielberg's in that one as an interviewee. So yeah,
the
so
five who came back or something.
Five who
like
came
that.
back, yeah, exactly, yeah. So a really really good dog. So I don't know for sure that Spielberg's seen Becoming Hitchcock, but I can't imagine that he didn't watch it. I'm sure he did. I'm sure Spielberg was sitting there with a glass of port in his hand, you know, at Christmas watching Becoming Hitchcock last December. And that's quite cool to imagine. But like,
that's very cool.
Spielberg's probably heard my music in that. Yeah.
Yes.
And there was
very close.
I don't know. I probably shouldn't say this, but there was definitely like there was talk of me potentially doing the Jaws documentary after Becoming Hitchcock, but Spielberg had already asked Blake Neely to do the music, who is also, you know, he's a fantastic composer. He's done a huge range of stuff, and he did what's it called, the show about the Air Force that Spielberg produced that was like a sequel to Band of Brothers. Can't remember what it's called, but it was. Usually, I can't believe I've forgotten that.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue. It was recent, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was recent. It was Masters of the Air. That's it. It was called Masters of the Air.
Yes.
And so they, you know, they had this great existing relationship already. So but Laurent did say to Spielberg, like, oh, I've been working with this guy, you know, like, you know, what do you think? And Spielberg's like, we've already asked him. So and I'm sure Laurent had a fantastic time working with Blake. But just the fact that they even had a conversation about me is kind of cool. Because
next level.
He's Spielberg, man.
And to be honest, if Laurent can carry your name in his back pocket for 10 years, you know, it means who knows what can happen. I really can't wait.
Cool, isn't it?
I can't wait for the day when there's a Spielberg project that you're scoring and I can turn to my girlfriend and my friends and be like, saw this coming. We spoke about this.
I mean, why not, right? Like, if Spielberg watched Becoming Hitchcock and then he makes a drama about Hitchcock, then in 10 years' time, maybe he can call me up. Yeah, there's no reason why. There's no reason why.
Wish fulfillment. We'll make it happen.
Exactly. Manifest it, Chris.
Manifest it. Is your score available that you did for the radio play?
There's only a tiny bit of it available, and that is on my SoundCloud, which still exists. It's called The Blind Man, and people can hear the opening credits for that. The rest of the score isn't commercially available, but you can find the drama itself. For me, it's like the resources I had were so low. So like, there's a lot of using sampled instruments, which sound okay, but like there's a bit of live violin in the opening titles, which really helps like sell the piece of music. But I don't usually release stuff unless we reach a certain standard, and unless I've been personally set up for enough success that I feel that it stands up against the everyone else, against my peers. And at that point, this was like 2014 or so, probably, I didn't feel like they had the budget to warrant. However, maybe somebody like Silver Screen or one of these labels might one day want to do a collection of scores where we re-record the music. They did a lot of that for composers like Elmer Bernstein and Jerry Goldsmith. Scores that were only available in mono, they would re-record in stereo and like better sound quality with orchestras around the world. There are people who've done that, so there's definitely opportunities in the future to maybe go back and do something. There was a film called Frequencies, which was, I think, maybe 2013, 2014, maybe just before that. I did that all with sampled instruments, but I did release that on Bandcamp because it was so much time spent on it. I managed to get it to a place where I felt like it kind of stood on its own, and that was using lots of glassy instruments and like bowed metal and stuff like that. And that I would love to go back and do an anniversary version of and release one day. But these things take ages to do. So you've got to find windows, and they don't really yield huge monetary success from doing it.
I see.
You've really got to kind of justify it to yourself when you go back and do something like that. Obviously, like, the further you are in your career, the more likely it is to become a commercial project. So were you to reach a level of somebody like Elfman or John Williams, sure, like people are going to buy
because
that.
People will listen. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I hope so. I really hope so, because I'd love to hear it. And okay, so conscious of time, let's talk about The Age of Disclosure. It looks really interesting. As I said, I was a massive fan of the X-Files growing up. So
yeah, I was fan of the X-Files too. We've got to be careful now we don't talk about 20 minutes about the X-Files.
No. We have to sort of bite our tongue here. Alien cover-ups, extraterrestrial life. This is right up my alley. Fascinating. Speaking of Spielberg links, it's directed by Dan Farah, his directorial debut, who, I was surprised to learn, produced many films before this, including Ready Player One. How did this come about for you, sir?
This is the direct link on from the previous story, because Laurent Bozero was speaking to Dan Farah, and Dan was trying to find a composer for his project, and Laurent was like, "Oh, well, it's got to be Blair Mowat. Like, you've got to email him now." So I get this email out of the blue. It's just saying, "Hey, like, my name's Dan Farah. I produce Ready Player One. I'm making a film about UAPs, and I would love to chat to you and talk further about this project." So he calls me up, and we chat on the phone. I'm actually over in the UK at this point, and he sends me a link to watch it in this like 2-hour window. And then the link expires. It's all very clandestine and secretive, and blows my mind.
Oh, so the film was made.
The film, it was a longer edit. The film had been shot, but it was had an extra like half hour or so on it. And so we talked about it. I put together a bunch of examples of stuff, and I know he was speaking to several other people as well. But it just ended up that he wanted to work together, and we scored the film it was actually last year. Most of the work was done in sort of end of summer last year. I ended up getting into South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin. So we were able to go there for that. Great premiere. Yeah. And now it's out on Amazon worldwide, available to rent and to purchase. And it's become this like sensation. And we really didn't know like whether, because there are other documentaries about aliens, obviously. And we knew this one was different. Like, you could just sort of tell that it was being made in a different way, and it was coming from a different angle. But there's no guarantee it's going to break through like that. But the fact that there are 34 government officials on the record, all hugely respectable, very serious people, all saying together, they're from different sides of the aisles, Democrats, Republicans, people who worked for, for Clinton, Obama, Bush, like, they're all saying the same thing effectively, that we are not alone, and the craft that has fallen out of the skies has been reverse engineered, and that other countries are also doing the same, and there is effectively a sort of secret war between countries where they don't really know what the other one has and aren't therefore willing to sort of show their hand. But this stuff, according to these people, is very much real, and it's very serious, and we need to talk about it, because there's a huge security implication of having things in the skies that you don't know what they are, and they're capable of moving in a way which just beggars belief, and they're capable of switching nuclear weapons on and off. If you're a big country, you probably want to know what those things are, because that's a
Right.
huge threat to your to human existence. Like, what if a nuclear war was accidentally started by one of these things? Obviously that hasn't happened yet, and I like to believe that it's more likely that they're there to stop something happening, if there was ever a nuclear situation, because that's when we started to see a lot of sightings. Apparently, is when we first invented the nuclear bomb. And so it's almost like, if this is an intelligence from another part of the universe, they almost had it's like they had a sensor, and they were like, oh, nuclear explosion. Interesting. All right, we've got to go over to the Milky Way and keep an eye on these guys, because they're like 300 years off from being able to reach us. Or they're like, whoa, we've seen loads of other civilizations destroy themselves by nuking each other. Now that this has gone off, we need to go and make sure that these people don't destroy each other. Because as far as we can tell, there is not a huge amount of life we don't know for certain that there is any life apart from us, but doesn't appear to be a huge amount of sign of activity in other galaxies from our telescopes of other beings. So if there are indeed other intellectual entities that are non-human in the universe, they probably value us quite a lot and would want us to not destroy ourselves. If they have some kind of moral compass, which almost like kind of Starfleet in Star Trek, having a duty to make sure that they don't interfere too much, but also that we don't lead to the wiping out of a civilization.
That sounds, oh my god,
that's quite a lot. It's quite a lot, isn't it?
Rabbit hole. Yeah. Sounds fascinating. It truly does. And it's, yeah, I've listened to multiple podcasts about. Did you ever see the movie The Fourth Kind?
I haven't actually, no.
Oh, I highly recommend that. It's of a small town that they claim they had extraterrestrial sightings and encounters with UFOs, and then what they do is they make the movie, and then as they play the movie, they slice in real life footage that they are reenacting of talks with therapists where they seem to be possessed by some higher being. But it's fascinating stuff. And it makes me think about one of the early episodes of The X-Files too, where I think Mulder, David Duchovny, says to Deep Throat, his contact, he says, "They're here, aren't they?" And Deep Throat stops and turns around and says, "They were here a long time ago." Oh god, it's just so, wow.
Some of those early X-Files episodes, once you start to get into this topic, I'm the tip of the iceberg. I'm by no means an expert in the way that somebody like Dan, our director, is. I've obviously learned a certain amount by osmosis, but you start to realize once you get into it that those early X-Files episodes are actually based on real things that happened, like eyewitness accounts from people who worked for the government or interacted with some kind of secret program. And Chris Carter, obviously, he must have known or spoken to people and took them at their word that these these
Wow.
things had happened, and then obviously it goes off into a different place where it becomes a world of fiction, because there's like, a lot of seasons of
Like
X-Files
9
to get through.
seasons, yeah, 11.
Yeah, it's a lot. but there is, the start of it is actually kind of grounded in some stuff that supposedly happened, which is really interesting. And that was a long time ago that was on. So people were talking and knew that, like, there was something going on. And I just think there's no doubt that there are things in the skies that we cannot explain, and they move in a way that the G-force would rip the organs apart of a human. So it's unlikely that there is a human in there. And if there is, it possesses a technological ability that is so far away from what we can achieve that it cannot be us in this present point in time. So that is like just a fact. And that is something effectively that presidents like Obama have said on like chat shows. Like, he's just like, there's stuff in the sky that we don't know what it is. So it is a UAP. It is a UFO. So you can debate what that is, where it might have come from, and whether certain videos are real or whatever. But you cannot really refute the fact that there is a mystery that needs to be unpacked of something in the sky that is unexplainable and must come from an origin that is just remarkable, whatever that origin is. And so that's a great starting point, just in a very grounded, sober way, to begin watching this documentary, and like knowing that you're going to be exploring that topic and finding out a huge amount of information about what people think it might be.
Okay, well, let that be the perfect advertisement for this movie. Then you've sold me. That's for sure.
Good, yeah.
And I have to say, I've listened to the score, and it is fantastic. I have to say, such a great listen. It really makes me want to watch the doc as well, the music itself. So amazing. Well, let's see. We'll have a conversation. Let's see what we can do as well. Hopefully, we can get this out there.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's been a UK screening. I really wanted to do one because when I was over there a couple of weeks ago, the film actually came out, and I was going to get in contact with like BAFTA or BAFTA Scotland and see if we could make something happen. I was just so busy. I was just like, those things can be quite like political and like need a lot of time to organize. It's not something you can do overnight. And I had a lot of friends and family to catch up with and business meetings to do and stuff. And so it wasn't possible on this trip. And I didn't just want to cobble something together at the last minute. But I do think this is a bit of an evergreen documentary, certainly for the next few years, that we're going to be talking about this and people are going to continue to discover it. So having some kind of screening and having, a Q&A of some kind would be awesome, to just let people see it on the screen, because it is a different, as you know, obviously as a lover of cinema, it is a different experience watching something in a room with other people who are like super into the topic. And I've thankfully been able to have that at the South by Southwest screening, where we were at I believe it's the Paramount Theatre, which is a huge theatre in Austin, and just like hearing people's gasps as like certain information is revealed or people say certain things. And also, like, it's not a particularly funny film, like, but there were some people like they almost laughed out of like awkwardness at certain moments, because they were like, that can't be real. So hearing people,
so you felt the response.
Hearing people laughing, or even just the silence, the fact that nobody is like rustling their candy or their popcorn, and at certain moments you can just tell that like everybody's laser focused on what's going on, and witnessing the level of attention go slightly up and slightly down, and when people kind of lean in, that is an amazing experience to be part of, especially when you've worked on the film for so long and you've seen it like 100 times writing the music for it. You're kind of a bit jaded from it at that point. It allows being able to see it through their eyes is amazing. And we had Michael Bay, we had Richard Linklater in the audience watching the film when we were at South by Southwest. Joe Rogan came along to see it as well, which led to our director Dan going on the Joe Rogan podcast, and his fan base is obviously So Dan was on Joe Rogan about a week and a half ago, and obviously Joe's fan base, they're very interested in UFOs, UAPs and stuff. So as he is himself, so that's definitely helped get it out there.
What's interesting about that, one of the podcasts I mentioned where I listened about these UFO experiences with government officials, it was the Joe Rogan podcast. I think a friend shared an episode. So there you go. All right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't surprise me.
Some of the interviewees in the film have been on his podcast. I think he's had at least like 2 or 3 of them on. So it just kind of made sense to have Dan on. And if people are listening and they're interested, what I would recommend doing is watching the film first and then going to listen to the podcast that Dan does with Joe Rogan. Because what I really love about it is he goes into some of the information that he couldn't put into the documentary. And they kind of discuss around the edges of, like, because there was stuff that they recorded that felt like it was too much. Like, this needed to be just so grounded and so, sobering that certain information felt too almost unbelievable, that that the public's not ready to kind of like hear certain things. Like you there's a red line under which you want to sort of keep, like, let's give this amount of information about what has been going on the last 80 years. And that's part of, like Dan working out as a director, the tone of it and the information, how it all comes together, and what to say and what not to say. And I know it like pains him, just because from a time point of view, he only had a certain amount of time he could fit things into, that if he could have done a longer cut, for people who are interested, and maybe that's something that will happen, he definitely would have loved to. But that podcast is a great way of finding out some of those extra things and some of the behind the scenes stuff once you've actually watched the main film.
I'll make a note of that. I'll make a note of that for sure, and make sure I give that a listen after I've seen the film. I will definitely keep my ear to the ground for a UK screening. And fingers crossed that happens.
Appreciate it.
All right. Well, I guess we'll leave it there for now. Blair, thank you so much for your time today. It was such a pleasure having you on.
Yep. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure, sir. Hope to speak to you again one day. Everyone, if you love film music, as we do over here at Phoenix Cinema Pod, I encourage you to listen to The Age of Disclosure. It is available wherever you get your music. It is a great score. And then go and watch the movie. It looks very, very interesting. Who knows? Maybe the Phoenix Cinema will program it one day. As always, our music and editing is by Stefan Krieger. Find more of him at stefan-krieger.com, and we shall see you next time on the Phoenix Cinema Podcast. Bye for now.